If you've been on the Spider-Man 2 hype train for a while, and especially since the wishlist listing came onto the PlayStation Store, then you know things have been very crazy this past week and just sad for a lot of fans. But it's got even crazier because the last 24 hours we have the real reason why Spider-Man 2 is practically missing and not being shown by Sony at this moment. Now firstly, certain people are sending death threats to Insomniac workers over the lack of Spider-Man 2 news. Now Aaron, who is the senior community manager at Insomniac, posted the following: "You can request, plead, and demand, but sending death threats isn't the best strategy for getting information about a video game." Now, this is not the first time it's happened. The same scenario happened with the first Spider-Man game back in 2018, then with, of course, the remastered version, and now here we are all over again. And overall, let's be honest, it's just very, very embarrassing because it ultimately just, I guess, goes to the entire community as a whole. It's just one thing where you almost feel, okay, where there's a few bad eggs, it's now just the entire community. That's typically how it feels. Now, what's your take on this? Do let me know in the comment section below. But of course, the big question that people do have is, where is Spider-Man 2? Now, Jeff Grubb, and may I add, he is a very notable person as he predicted successfully once again regarding the state of play to either happen in February or March. Of course, it happened in February, but he recently spoke about the new upcoming showcase on a podcast whilst talking about the recent reactions on the state of play that just happened. Now, on the show, Jeff mentioned that a new showcase is coming before E3, which of course a lot of us did expect, and that it will ultimately be the second phase of the PlayStation 5. Now, his exact words were the following: "Sony itself is saving its own actual good stuff for something else," which is what's basically happening here. They're saving their good stuff for the PlayStation showcase that's going to happen before E3. It was supposed to happen last fall, but they kept pushing it back simply because their developers weren't ready. Now those developers are ready, and they should have a massive showcase that should really set up the stage for the second phase of the PlayStation 5. Now, of course, this is ultimately the stage for Spider-Man 2's first ever gameplay showcase, and very likely a new trailer too. Now, to give you some perspective on the time frame, E3 is on the 13th of June to the 16th. Now, of course, it's stated that it's quote-unquote before. Now, with before E3, I mean, it really, I guess, just boils down to how specific do you want to get here, because it can quite literally mean anything. I mean, before can mean in June, a few days before E3 as a whole, or alternatively, just a lot sooner, maybe potentially May. Now, I would like to say, and this is my personal opinion, that I feel that, you know, it's going to be a bit sooner. I feel we're probably looking at around April or potentially late May. I mean, it just feels a bit more realistic, I guess, to give enough time for them to actually showcase Spider-Man 2 and also drop a few extra bits after its official showcase as well. I mean, any sort of strategy that, you know, they feel is going to be suitable to really make sure that all the lights are basically on Spider-Man 2 and that there really isn't any other sort of margin to be talking about another game, or at least at that moment in time anyway. Now, of course, Sony are going to be very strategic on how this is done, as it is pretty much their most anticipated game, or if not the most anticipated game this year, and they have a lot to over-deliver on, simply because the last Spider-Man game was just amazing. But of course, the question is, how do you make something that was already flawless better? Now, I mean, sure, we have Venom, and there are no doubts lots of missed opportunities in the last game in terms of features, which I expect Spider-Man 2 to have, but the point still stands, of course. So I'm very excited to see just exactly what they do have in store. But the fears do tend to increase still on a daily basis from various fans, because, of course, if we're talking about the release date being fall of 2023, then of course the question is, okay, well, how late do we we get until we actually see some, really in-depth gameplay, or ultimately just have, a lot more information than we already do. And I guess overall, it's probably going to be a very small window in that sense. Because, for example, somebody asked them on Twitter, Spider-Man 2, no information, but supposedly still releasing this year. And Insomniac Games just simply responded, full 2023, friend. And then another thing which I thought was quite funny was someone respectfully asked, hey, sorry to bother you guys, but are we getting a new trailer before release of Spider-Man 2? Again, sorry for, basically being a little impatient. And, well, you guessed it, they actually did confirm whether or not there's going to be a trailer before the release of Spider-Man 2, saying yes, there will be a trailer before its release. And I think it's quite funny because despite all the negative stuff that does happen in the community, for example, the things that I did mention at the start of the video, whoever runs Insomniac's Twitter account is quite witty in that sense, where they are very jokey and they can actually sort of, I guess, just play on, people's excitement for the most part. So for example, this was going around and people were saying, well, there you have it, a new trailer basically confirmed relatively soon, because of course you're going to get a new trailer before the video game is released. So I think in that perspective, it's quite funny. But in terms of, again, that window that I'm talking about, where even if we're going for June and then we're talking about that full release, it really comes down to, okay, is it going to be pretty much a situation where it's just hitting the ground and then running from there? And what I mean by that is, okay, you get, your first in-depth gameplay. Let's just say it was like 20 minutes worth of footage where they maybe showcase a few missions or the beginning of the story and then features, etc, etc. And then, maybe alongside that you actually have some gameplay. But then my question is, okay, well, does it go radio silent from that moment onward, or does it go the complete opposite direction where I say, again, that situation of hitting the ground running, where it's, okay, new gameplay, new trailer, now that's the showcase done, and then all of the other bits of information just come out on social media, but actually it's all very much strategically done to where between then and the release date, there is not going to be any sort of drought. And again, if we go back to how their marketing strategy was for the first Spider-Man game, understandably and arguably, I guess you could say as well, because that was their brand new game, right? No one ever saw what they actually had in store for us. So granted, they actually had to, give us some sort of insight a lot sooner than the release date, because we've never seen the general framework and the game overall in the world, whereas now we do, so we kind of know already what to expect. It's more, again, as I mentioned earlier, the small little features in the game of an overall story that really play that bigger role. But again, I'm eager to hear your thoughts on this and what you think they'll showcase, and if you think it's going to be a lot of information right up until the release with multiple various teasers like what they've done with the first Spider-Man game, or are they actually going to be very quiet in general and almost make the game a mystery until literally like a month before release. And of course, if you've been on the train for Hogwarts Legacy in terms of anticipated games or games that really have that solid spot for Game of the Year, then that game has been doing some crazy things. And well, the other day we got even bigger news that I think has got tons and tons of people mega excited simply because you didn't quite frankly expect it. So go ahead and check that video out that you see on screen right now.